Forseti, honorable guests. Arctic sea ice has undergone dramatic changes in the last few years. I shall try not to repeat too much what others have mentioned. There have been great changes in sea ice extent, concentration, dramatic loss of multi-year ice, which is quite serious. Ice thickness has decreased dramatically, and there are also seasonal changes. Well, this is very unusual and deeply worrying on so many levels, as many of you have talked about earlier today. Analysis and predictions of the IPCC are also quite disturbing. Behind me, you see a graph from the Cryosphere Today and the National Snow and Ice Data Center showing the trend for the last 40 years. Now, 40 years is quite a short time on geological timescale. So you might ask, how do we know that this is unusual and worrying? Do I need to? Well, for the last 40 years, we've had satellite observations. Well, satellites go back a bit further back in time, but now I'm talking about for monitoring sea ice. And the trend in that is increased resolution, geometrically resolution, better information, and more information. For example, about indications of thickness. Of course, we have also data from submarines showing us how the thickness has been changing, but basically satellites are helping us more and more and giving us information quicker and in a more kind of better overview as well. Now, planes and ships reports go back quite about 70 years or so, and those are also important. Ice charts go back almost 130 years, and it's worth mentioning that around 1900, the Danish Met Institute became the international center for gathering sea ice information and published ice reports every year. Now, the information was brought from very many other nations. Of course, Denmark, Greenland, but very many other nations as well. And so there's a long tradition for cooperation, and I think that is really, really important. Now, Norway, Iceland, Russia, other nations have a long history of historic sea ice data, from logbooks, from diaries, and ice charts and annals, and this data is also very important. Now, we do have this data because people lived in the area. They went fishing, sealing, whaling. They were explorers, and it's worth mentioning, of course, that the more the explorers learned from people living in these areas, usually better they fared in these harsh conditions. And then, of course, we have sediment cores going back thousands of years. Now, I should mention also that it's important to have an overlap. The reason why, well, part of the reason why we can interpret sediment cores many thousand years back in time is that we have overlap with historical data and better resolution data. So the changes that we've seen observed for the last few years are really deeply worrying, because in historic time we have no experience of this situation. So that is something we must face. Now, but in general, this whole cooperation between scientists, explorers, inhabitants, even media giving this information, I think it's a very good example of good cooperation. So the next question is then, what do we need to know? What are the main gaps? And this, of course, is because we don't have any experience of this situation. And even if models are not maybe ideal to show us exactly how reality is or will be, I think they are extremely important to help us understand the interaction between different natural features. And by doing so, we can make predictions and create future scenarios and understand the variability, and then start to try to fathom how this will affect us in the future and what the consequences will really be. Now, this figure on top there is from a Nordic top-level research initiative project, CRIKE, and CRIKE stands for Cryosphere-Atmosphere Interaction in a Changing Arctic Climate, and it's coordinated by Marko Kulmala in the University of Helsinki in Finland. And one of the things that this project focuses on is trying to understand these interactions. And of course there are other projects as well, and as we've heard of today, but I think this is one of the steps that we must take. The next one is what do we need to do? And I think by listening to people with experience, people living in the area, more research, collaboration, monitoring, I think that's crucial. We need to also be ready for search and rescue operations, improve the infrastructure, and create discussion. In a week, the International Ice Charting Working Group will meet here in Reykjavik, and it's a non-funded kind of international gathering of sea ice scientists or people concerned in sea ice from every aspect, both research, monitoring, and basically every level. It's a really important forum for us, and I welcome any of you who are interested to contact me, and if you're interested in participating. It's hosted by the University of Iceland and the Icelandic Met Office, and Thor Jakobsson, who's a pioneer here, he's in the room. And so we will be meeting with people from different industries, different research area, to try to see what do we need to do. Now, one of the things this group is worried about is the dilemma of both people perhaps not understanding fully how serious this change in the sea ice field has been and will be in the future, and at the same time being worried about people not understanding either how dangerous these waters can be and still will be. And so that's, I think, something we need to try to kind of give out to people. Now, there will be increased tourism, transport, and resource exploitation. And you can say it's a bit ironic that the use of fossil fuel is causing this thawing, which is then causing more exploitation. And I think we need to, this sounds as if I'm very pessimistic. I think nature and technology shouldn't have to be against each other. I think we should try to make benefit of what we can. So the Icelandic Coast Guard participated in an experiment or exercise this autumn called SAREX, which was a collaboration of very many nations and testing out search and rescue off the northeast Greenland. And I think this kind of activity is extremely important, and also I think this gathering here is extremely precious, and I think this is one of the steps that is very positive that we are taking to talk together and collaborate. Thank you.